Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Divyanka and I'm a doctor of pharmacy in the US. I'm living my best professional life and I'm here to help you live your best and most productive life. Today's video is the next video in my Midyear 2020 series. Now, I'm very well aware that midyear interviews and the whole process is very much so underway. Companies have been conducting interviews for a few weeks now, and because this year everything is virtual, things look very different. I'm recording this on November 12th, so again, things are underway, interviews are happening, people are even getting offers. Just yesterday, I was talking to a friend who is now a second-year fellow. You've actually seen him on my channel. I did a podcast episode with him. His name is Soham Shukla, and he was sharing information on the whole fellowship process. Currently, he's a second-year fellow in HEOR at GSK, and he actually told me that they've actually gone ahead and sent out their offers to their top candidates. Now, of course, we're sitting in a situation in COVID where midyear is virtual and everything is happening virtually. So especially independent programs, they're kind of going on their own timeline. And honestly, it doesn't make sense to wait for midyear if you are an independent program. So I know a lot of programs are kind of coming to an end, things are happening, but one thing is for sure, the Rutgers program is actually still happening during the midyear dates in December. I know that the MCPHS and the Northeastern programs don't close applications for a couple of days as well. So there is still time. There are still a lot of interviews to be happening. Although a lot is underway and a lot has happened, a lot of that is with independent programs. So there are still interviews to be had, and a lot of you are probably still at the beginning of the process. Now, because the application and interview process is already underway, I wanted to provide you guys with a quick interview tips crash course in this video to just help you with interviews that are coming up for you guys. Even if you've already done some interviews, it cannot hurt to have some more tips, just refresh on things. When you're interview prepping, you're thinking about a lot of things, you're talking to a lot of people, and some things get lost. So hopefully this list will help you guys. I'm just gonna go ahead, talk about all the tips that I have for interviews during fellowships, and as always, I really just hope this is helpful for you guys. All right, so the first tip I have is do your homework. Do your homework on the company. This is so very important. You have to know about the company that you are interviewing for. It's not enough to only know about the role, the functional area, yourself, and the people you're interviewing with, but it is very important to know about the company. Not only for the interview, but you should know about the company because you will have to work there. You're gonna have to spend your next 1 to 2 years there. So if you don't know about the company, their pipeline, what they're working in, their therapeutic areas, what they're good at, what their future looks like, then it's really a waste for you to even work there because again, you should want to work there. There should be a genuine interest there. So again, do your homework. I actually have another video where I talk about how I researched pharmaceutical companies while I was interview prepping and what things I was looking for. In that video, I have a free downloadable which kind of lays out all the little things that I looked at when I was researching companies. I wrote them down, so I was prepping, I was thinking about it, and I was actively making notes so that I could review those prior to my interviews. It's a crazy time. You're going to be talking to a lot of different companies and it's easy to get lost in the different details of different companies. So this is very, very helpful. Now, I personally had all of that information in that downloadable that I provided in my other video, and I would review that before I interviewed with such and such company. Another tactic is to use index cards. So a lot of people just have an index card per company. They write their details that they like to remember, and that's an easy way to kind of look over the index card right before your interview so you can kind of review what you looked up, what you found interesting for that company, and what, again, piques your interest and what you want to talk about. So those are just some tactics. I used a Word document. It helped me organize my thoughts and what I found and how I wanted to present those thoughts in my interviews. Some people use index cards. Whatever it is, however it is helpful for you, just make sure to do your homework, research the companies, make notes, and actually mention that stuff and show that you have knowledge on the company itself during your interview. Now, the next tip is to use the STAR method while answering questions for interviews. Now, I am not the first one to come up with this. A STAR method has been around forever, but it is worth mentioning. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And what this means is every answer that you give to a question in an interview, it should be in the STAR format. Now why? This format actually really helps you create a conclusive story about your experiences and about what you want to say to answer an interview question. This is a successfully proven method, so it's definitely worth researching, looking into, and again, worth your time to prep to answer questions in an interview with this method. So for instance, as a strategy, if I were to be asked a question, usually I'd respond with a story about something I've done, an experience I've had, and how I would frame that would again be in the STAR method. So the S stands for situation. I would lay out my situation. I was interning at so-and-so company and so-and-so happened. The T stands for task. So for example, in that situation, I would then outline, oh, I was given such and such task, whether that's a project, whatever your experience or story is, the task part comes in there. You were given something to do, or there was a problem to find a solution to. Now the A stands for action. What did you do? What did you do in this situation? I completed this project. My team was having such and such problem, and therefore I did A, B, and C to help the situation. Now R stands for result. What was the outcome of your situation? The action that you just explained in the situation that you just explained, what was the outcome? What happened from it? Did you impact the whole company? Did a change incur from the problem that you solved? Etc. Basically, this STAR method helps you frame a story in a really good way, in a really concise way that again helps you answer questions in an interview. My next tip is to have a one-pager for a review sheet about yourself. Now, this is mainly to kind of have answers and stories and experiences laid out for those mundane, normal, general questions that are asked in an interview, such as strengths and weaknesses. You could write all the different points that you want to mention in an interview about yourself or about your experiences, what's brought you there, what you want in life, what you want out of the fellowship, etc. Again, just a bullet point list of what you want to mention so you don't forget it and you can review it on this one pager prior to an interview. Major skills or characteristics about yourself or the company, again, that you want to mention. And just highlighting some general experiences or stories about your past experiences to utilize while answering questions. Again, this is a strategy that many use. You use your experiences and stories from that to help answer questions during an interview. So it's very nice to lay out those experiences and stories and kind of lay out where you can use those depending on the questions that you're asked in an interview. So if you've got all of this laid out on a one-pager, it's very easy to kind of read that over, refresh your memory about what you want to talk about, what it is that is important to mention. And again, this will definitely help you in an interview. So I highly suggest you doing this. I do it and it's very, very, very helpful. My next tip is do not forget to breathe. Interviews can be stressful. A lot of people have anxiety about interviews, about performing in an interview, about talking about yourself. The list is endless, but you don't have to always be stressed. Take time to breathe. Think of the interview as a conversation. And actually, if you think of it like that, and if you truly just have a genuine conversation with the interviewer, the interview will probably go great. So just take a moment to breathe. Don't just be stressed out, because when you're stressed and when you're in that anxious mode, you're not at your best mental capacity, and you want to be answering these questions and perform in an interview at your best. So take time to breathe. If there's a question that you don't know how to answer or you just don't have the answer immediately, you can take some time. Don't be scared to do that. You can even say and mention, wow, that's a challenging question. Just give me 2 seconds to think about it. Take the time, take a deep breath, collect your thoughts, and then answer the question. Again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. It is not seen as a negative point, and if it is seen as a negative point from the interviewer, then is that someone you really want to be working for? Probably not. So again, take the time, collect your thoughts. You'd rather give a collected, concise answer after taking 10 seconds to think and collect your thoughts than blabber an answer without thinking, not get to a conclusion with your answer, and just seem really fumbled by the question. You're not always going to have the answer to everything, and that is okay. It is okay to show that. So again, just take time to breathe, know that it's okay, and again, act confidently, collect your thoughts, and then speak. My next tip is to know your CV or resume. Now, this sounds like pretty cliche advice, but I promise you it is not. When I heard this last year, I definitely wrote it off as cliche advice. I was like, yeah, I know my CV. I know what I've done. I know the projects that I've worked on. And for the most part, I did. But I was actually in an interview and I got asked a very specific question about a project I had listed. I had done a presentation on a company's marketed drug, and I had been asked a very specific question about that presentation and what the outcome was, what details I learned. And I knew that I had done that presentation. I could tell you what the drug was for. But because when I was prepping, I just wrote off knowing your CV as, yes, I definitely know my CV. And I didn't take the time to go into that much depth of that project and take the time to remember what I talked about in that presentation. It caught me off guard. I didn't have an answer to that question, and it definitely hurt my interview. I didn't get a next round interview for that fellowship. So again, really know your CV. Know what your presentations were about. Know what any papers or posters that you've written on your CV about. Know the content of it. Know what you did in depth in your internships. We all forget. That's totally fine. Some experiences were years ago, but again, if you're asked about it because it's on your CV and you don't have an answer for it, it will count against you. So really know your CV. My next tip is to read over your application. Again, sounds cliche, but it's not. You know yourself. And you would think that you would know how you applied and what you said in your application. But again, sometimes you don't. You've applied to many fellowships, you've been talking about yourself in all of these interviews, and there might have been something specific that you mentioned in your application to a specific fellowship that you don't remember. Now, it's very easy for the interviewer to bring it up because that's the only application that they've read for you. So they don't know about your other applications, they don't know your life, so they only know what you applied with. So it's very important to read over your application, know in your mind what you said to XYZ company so that you can speak to it again in your interview if you're asked about it, if it comes up, etc. Again, sounds cliche, but it's not, especially when you're fumbling through all these different interviews, you're talking to all these people, all these different companies. You just get lost in it, and it's very normal and easy. So just do yourself a favor, read over your application before you talk to the company that you're interviewing with, and it'll make your life a lot easier. My next tip is to practice and rehearse for your interviews, but don't over prep. A lot of my videos have been about interview prep, and interview prep is extremely important. It is important to prep what you're gonna say in response to questions. It is important to prep and practice interviewing, whether it's the actual talking, mock interviews, etc. But there is a limit beyond which you would be over prepping. You don't wanna sit in an interview and sound like a robot. You genuinely want to sound like yourself. Now, if you sit there and rehearse answers to questions and you have a script going on in your head, you're automatically going to sound robotic. So you don't wanna do that. It's gonna come off as ingenuine. When you're sitting there trying to remember your script, it's going to show on your face. You're going to look like you've rehearsed this, that you're just memorizing it, and that's going to come off as very ingenuine. They're going to know you don't mean those words, even if you mean them. So, interview prep enough, know yourself, but give room and leeway for that creativity of conversation and that natural flow of conversation to also happen in your interviews. I know that's a really fine line, and that's more about just knowing yourself, knowing how you can add to the conversation, knowing how you can talk, but it's very important. I don't want you guys to sound robotic in your interviews because that just kind of erases all the prep you've done, and you're worth a lot more than that. So again, prep, but do not over prep. My next tip is to prepare questions. It is never okay to not ask any questions in an interview. Questions not only show genuinity and interest, but that gives you some time to ask the people questions about the program, about the company, and you really have to remember that this is somewhere you're gonna be working and spending and investing your time for 1 to 2 years. I know that people say that in interviews, you're not only being interviewed, but you're also interviewing the company, and I think a lot of people overlook this. I think it's very important to have the confidence to go in and know exactly what you're worth. Don't just go in and want any fellowship. You're worth a lot more. So again, think about genuine questions. Always ask questions. You're definitely gonna get some time in an interview to do that. They expect to give you time to ask questions, so prepare questions. And one more little tip regarding questions, don't make them general questions. Make sure to really make them specific to the program, to the company. Again, that's going to show genuine interest. It's going to help you assess whether or not this fellowship is even right for you, and in the end will help you. My next tip is to know what you're in for in regards to who will be interviewing you and how many people. If there's any research you can do as to who will be interviewing you, definitely know that it'll help you, and definitely expect more than one interviewer, especially after your first round of interviews. I talked about this in my other video where I talked about what to expect in your first, second, and third round of interviews, so if that's of interest, go ahead and watch that. But again, for most of your interviews, you will have on average 2 people, but it can go up to 3 or 4. So expect kind of a panel, expect more than one person, and know how to talk with more than one person. Now, this might just come with experience and practice. So maybe after a few interviews with a couple of people, it'll become easier, but don't just address one person. Although one person will be asking you the question, make sure you're talking to the panel, whether it's 2 people, 3 people, or 4 people, and make sure that you're kind of making eye contact with each person, talking to each person as a panel, and not just directing your conversation to one person. So again, have that expectation when you're going in of having more than one interviewer. My next tip is to not sound repetitive. This is kind of gonna come from when you're interview prepping. When you're laying out those experiences and those stories that you wanna talk about when you're answering interview questions, make sure that you're laying out at least 5 to 10 different instances where you can bring in different stories. You don't want to use the same story, the same experience for every single question you're asked, even if it answers the question. You can use it once or twice, but again, don't sound too repetitive. This is going to help you because if you add variety to your answers, dependent on your experiences in the past, it's going to show that you've been a part of multiple things, you have multiple experiences to speak to, and again, this comes off in a very positive manner. This will definitely come from prep. If you don't prep such instances and experiences and stories to talk about, the same ones are going to be recirculating in your head and you're naturally going to sound repetitive. So that's something that can come from prep. Again, make sure to kind of lay out those instances and answers in a way where you have a lot to talk about. My next piece of advice is to stay updated on current events. I talked about this when I talked about how to research companies, but it's really important to know what's happening now. Imagine if you didn't know what was happening in the world, and let's just say in this COVID world, you didn't know COVID was happening. I know it's very far-fetched, but that's just an exaggeration of an example. If you were asked about it in an interview and you didn't know about it, it wouldn't come across in a positive way. On the flip side, if something big was happening in the therapeutic area that the company works in, at the company itself, with one of the drugs at the company, etc. If you know about that and can speak to that in an interview, that'll automatically kind of give you a +1 point because they'll see that you're talking about something that's quite relevant to the present day, you're staying updated on what's happening, that shows genuine interest in not only what you want to be doing, but the field that you're entering, etc. There are so many positive points to this, and so I would say not only just for Midyear, but in general, maybe sign up for a few pharmacy-specific news links that tells you what's happening at XYZ company, any big news that comes out, all of that stuff. You should definitely stay updated. This will not only help your general knowledge, but will of course help you in interviews. My next piece of advice is to keep your answers short. In an interview, you want to make sure that what you're trying to convey is coming across. Now, the more words you add to your answers, the more confusion it can bring, and you don't want that. So keep your answers as concise, clear, and direct as possible. Of course, you're going to be intertwining some stories, but don't get lost in that. Don't give extra background detail. Go with the STAR method. Talk about what happened, what you did, and what the result was. That is very direct, and that will really help you answer questions. So again, be mindful of how much you're talking. You want to talk enough, but you don't want to talk too much. Again, that's going to come across in a very negative way. So whether this comes from interview prepping, mock interviews, practicing with a friend, whatever technique helps you, make sure you're able to answer questions in a very direct and concise way in an interview. All right, the next tip I want to talk about is body language. Body language is key. You want to make sure that what you're saying kind of matches with how you're presenting yourself. So of course, that's body language. Greet them with a smile. Make sure you're sitting tall, confident. If your voice portrays a certain attitude, make sure your body goes with that. And moreover, you want to come off as confident. You want to make sure your body language is very relaxed, upright, and you want to make sure that you're coming off like that. Everybody wants a candidate who is relaxed, confident, happy to be there. So again, show that. Show that in how you talk, show that in your body language, show that in your greeting. Do everything that you can to make the conversation flow very naturally, be very nice, and be confident. Especially right now when all the interviews are virtual, all the rules about firm handshakes and all of that kind of fizzle away. You need to connect even more through a screen, through a camera. So again, make sure they can see your face, make sure you're sitting upright, you're happy to be there. You greet them very warmly at the beginning of the interview. Again, all of those feel-good things that are gonna make any human feel very good in any situation, and it'll definitely help you in totality. If this takes practice, practice with your friends, do mock interviews. Again, be relaxed and be very, very present with both your communication and your body language, and this will only help you in interviews. My next tip is to know that saying "I don't know" is okay. It really is okay, and this is for so many reasons. One of those reasons is because in the real working world, you're not gonna know everything. So having the confidence to say that you don't know definitely shows a lot of soft skills. If you're asked a hard question in an interview, it's okay to say, "Hey, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'd be very happy to do the research and let you know of my thoughts in regards to the question you asked via email after this interview." That not only shows that you're confident to say that you don't know the answer, you didn't make up a fake answer, you're ready to go ahead and put the effort to go ahead and do that research about the question that you were asked, and you're ready to communicate the answer to them as a follow-up conversation. Now, in and of itself, that answer shows so many soft skills and skills that an employer would be looking for. So again, I think that that really helps in a situation when you don't know the answer to a question. So know that it's okay to say "I don't know." Again, in any realm, but especially in an interview, people don't think about that, and it's very normal. We can't know everything, we can't prep for everything, and an employer should understand that. So again, show that you're confident in saying "I don't know" if you're in that situation and you're asked a question as such, and definitely make sure that you give the option of following up afterwards. Now, my next and last tip is regarding thank you emails. At any point in your professional life, it is always necessary to send some sort of follow-up communication after your interview. Now, generally that is an email format, and especially right now with all of Midyear's interviews being virtual, you will be communicating via email. So make sure that after every interview within 24 hours, you are sending a follow-up thank you email. Now, to dig a little deeper into that, you want to make sure that you're not just following up for the sake of following up. Don't just send a generic email that says, "Hi, so-and-so, thank you for your time during this interview, had a great conversation," and just sign off. That's a very general email, and that's not going to catch anyone's attention. You want to send a follow-up email that does catch someone's attention. So how you're going to do that is actually genuinely speak. Speak about what you talked about in the interview. Your interview probably consisted of a different conversation than any other interview that they had with other candidates. So make sure to point out the little nuances. If you asked questions and really benefited from their answers, mention that. Say, "Thank you so much for answering my question. I found it interesting that you said such and such thing. It really helped me gain a holistic picture of what I could gain from this fellowship and what it would be like to work with this team." You could even ask a follow-up question. If you didn't have enough time to get all your questions answered, then this is a perfect time to ask more questions. Say, "Hey, I know our interview went up to the 30-minute mark. I just had one more question regarding this program." Ask the question, and if they have time, they'll definitely answer it. Again, this shows genuine interest. So my tip isn't only sending thank you emails, definitely make sure you do that, but follow up with genuine interest. That's gonna help you really stand out from the crowd. And that's a wrap. I know this video was extremely long and there was a lot that I talked about and there were a lot of tips, but honestly, I know how fellowship interviews and the whole interview process goes. It's hectic, it's busy. There's a lot happening, you're having a lot of conversations, you're talking to different programs, different people, different companies, and there's just a lot happening, and it's very mentally hard to focus sometimes. So I hope that this kind of helped you recenter, help you focus, and provided you with kind of a crash course list of things that you need to keep in mind while interviewing. As always, I hope these tips helped you. If they did, definitely let me know. If you have any follow-up questions, do not be afraid to email me. A lot of you have, and I've definitely taken the time to answer. So I, of course, hope that this and all of my other videos are very helpful to you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, you guys will see me in the next one.